In 1987, on the trading floor of the American Stock Exchange at 86 Trinity Place in Lower Manhattan, a group of exchange officials gathered around a terminal and stared at something none of them had ever seen before. Bolted to the exchange's own order entry keyboard was a mechanical device, a custom-built actuator wired to a computer in the back office that was pressing the keys by itself. It was entering trades, real trades, priced by algorithm, timed by software, executed by a metal finger that did not sweat, did not hesitate, and did not need a lunch break. The man who built it was standing nearby, watching. His name was Thomas Peterffy. He was Hungarian. He had arrived in this country 22 years earlier, unable to speak a word of English, and he was about to be told, for the third or fourth time, that what he was doing was not allowed. Not because it was illegal, but because no one had ever written a rule against it. Because no one had ever imagined anyone would try. That is the story. Not the billionaire part, though we will get there. Not the Forbes list or the net worth that fluctuates with the stock price of a company that now processes 3 million trades a day across 150 markets in 34 countries. The story is something smaller and stranger. A man who looked at the most powerful financial system on earth and saw, with the clarity of an outsider, that the entire thing was being run on mental math and laminated cheat sheets. And who decided, with the stubbornness of someone who had already left one system behind, that he was going to fix it whether anyone wanted him to or not. Thomas Peterffy was born in Budapest on September 30th, 1944. The timing matters. Hungary was under Nazi occupation. Within months, it would fall under Soviet control, and it would stay there for the next 4 decades. He grew up in the world of Kadar-era communism. Gray concrete apartment blocks, state-run shops with sparse displays, utilitarian wool coats, flat caps, streets that were clean and austere and offered no room for the kind of person he apparently was from the beginning. Even as a boy, he traded. Chewing gum, obtained through whatever channels reached behind the Iron Curtain, resold at markup to schoolmates in a scarcity economy. It was small. It was also, if you understand what came later, a perfect rehearsal. He was finding price differentials and exploiting them before he knew the word arbitrage. In 1965, at 21, he left. The precise mechanism varies slightly depending on when he tells the story. A travel visa, a decision not to return, the quiet mathematics of defection during the Cold War. What is consistent across every account is what he arrived with. He had almost no money. He had no connections. He spoke no English in a city that ran on English, that shouted in English, that printed its opportunities in English on every sign he could not read. Mid-60s. New York, checker cabs, neon, steam from the grates, a density of noise and commerce that must have been physically disorienting for someone raised in the muted palate of socialist Budapest. He found work that did not require fluent English, a draftsman's position at an engineering firm. He taught himself the language through immersion and brute repetition, the same way he would later teach himself everything else that mattered in his life. And then he found computers. It is hard now to reconstruct what that encounter felt like in the late 1960s. The machines were not sleek. They were institutional. Heavy teletype terminals clattering on continuous paper, or CRT screens glowing green or amber under fluorescent light in rooms that smelled like toner and linoleum. Peterffy rented time on terminals at night, staying up to teach himself programming from manuals in a language he was still learning, for a technology that most of the professional world had not yet imagined would matter outside of universities and government labs. What he discovered was precision. The machine would do exactly what you told it. If the instructions were correct, The output was perfect. No ambiguity, no negotiation, no boss deciding what you were worth based on your accent. That was more than any employer or government had ever offered him. By the mid-1970s, he was at Mokata Metals, a commodities trading firm using early computer systems to model commodity prices. And here, the second encounter happened, the one that would define everything. He saw how financial instruments were priced. Specifically, he saw how options were priced. The Black-Scholes model had been published in 1973, giving the world an exact mathematical framework for valuing options contracts. In theory, any option on any underlying asset could be priced with precision. In practice, on the actual trading floors where billions of dollars changed hands every day, traders were approximating. Mental math, laminated cheat sheets with pre-calculated values for common scenarios. Gut instinct refined by experience, and they were frequently wrong. Not dramatically, not obviously, but wrong by enough that someone who could calculate the correct price faster every time would find money lying on the ground. Peterffy saw the gap, and the gap looked to him exactly like the chewing gum arbitrage in Budapest, a price differential waiting to be exploited. Except this time, the differential was between human approximation and mathematical truth, and the scale was not schoolyard pocket change, but the entire American options market. In 1977, he bought a seat on the American Stock Exchange. The cost was somewhere in the range of $35,000 to $50,000, depending on the month. He became an individual market maker, trading equity options on the floor. If you have ever seen footage of an open outcry trading floor from that era, you know the scene. Traders in colored jackets, specialists in distinct colors, packed into pits around octagonal wooden posts, shouting bids and offers, flashing hand signals across the room, scribbling on paper tickets that accumulated in drifts on the floor by the end of the day. The noise level has been compared to a rock concert. Pneumatic tubes carried orders overhead. The air was dense with adrenaline and paper dust, and the particular institutional smell of a building where large men had been sweating under fluorescent lights since the opening bell. Into this world walked a Hungarian immigrant with a computer printout. Every morning before the market opened, Peterffy ran his pricing models, first on time-shared systems, later on early personal computers as they became available. He generated updated pricing sheets for every option series he intended to trade. He brought the printouts to the floor. While the other traders were squinting at their laminated cards and calculating in their heads, Peterffy was reading exact values off a page. His prices were mathematically precise. Theirs were close enough, usually. Close enough is not the same as correct. And over thousands of trades, the difference between correct and close enough is a fortune. He was making money. Serious money. But the printouts had a flaw, and the flaw was time. Markets moved. By mid-morning, the prices on his sheet were stale. He needed real-time computation on the floor. He needed the computer beside him, not back in the office. So he built one. If you could have seen it, you would not have known what to make of it. Peterffy and a small team of engineers constructed a handheld device, essentially a crude proto-tablet, bulky by any standard, with a small screen that displayed his computed prices updated as market conditions changed. He carried it onto the Amex floor. The other traders had paper. He had a glowing screen. There was no rule against it. There was no rule against it because no one in the history of the American Stock Exchange had ever walked onto the trading floor carrying a computer. The rule did not exist because the possibility had not been imagined. The exchange noticed, and the exchange responded in the way institutions always respond when someone does something that is not forbidden but is also not welcome. They wrote a rule. No electronic devices on the trading floor. Here is where the story turns into something that sounds invented, but is not. Peterffy's team engineered a workaround. They built a device that displayed prices using physical paddles, flip cards driven by a motor. It was not, technically, an electronic display. It was a mechanical display driven by electronics, which was a different thing, if you squinted hard enough at the language of the rule. The exchange wrote another rule. Peterffy engineered another workaround. Every time they built a wall, he found a window. Every time they sealed the window, he found a vent. The exchange was writing rules for a world that had already begun to disappear. And the man forcing the disappearance was standing on their floor, smiling politely, holding a device they had never anticipated. And then came the robotic finger. By the mid-1980s, Peterffy did not want the computer merely to calculate prices. He wanted it to execute trades. The exchange rules were clear on one point. Orders had to be entered on the exchange's proprietary terminal by pressing the keys. The rules said nothing about whose finger did the pressing. So his engineers built a mechanical actuator, a servo-driven arm clamped to the exchange's own terminal, wired to Peterffy's computer system through cables that ran across the floor. The computer determined the trade. The actuator pressed the keys. The orders entered the system. It was absurd. It was brilliant. It was a Rube Goldberg machine beating a trillion-dollar institution at its own game. When exchange officials gathered around the terminal and stared at the device, what they were seeing was not just a mechanical arm. They were seeing the end of their world. They just did not know it yet. They told Peterffy it was not acceptable. They revised the rules to require that a human being must physically enter orders. They thought they had solved the problem. They had not solved the problem. They had only delayed it. Because the logic Peterffy was following, that exact computation would always beat approximation, that machines would always beat manual process, that automation would always find a way past the gatekeepers, was not a philosophy. It was a mathematical certainty, and mathematical certainties do not care about exchange rules. Here is the part of the story that most people skip. The floor traders who fought Peterffy were not fools. They were skilled professionals who understood exactly what was happening. They looked at the mechanical arm-pressing keys on the terminal, and they saw their own obsolescence. And they were right. Over the next 2 decades, open outcry floor trading would be almost entirely eliminated from American exchanges. The pits, where men had shouted bids since the 19th century, would fall silent, one by one, until the trading floor itself became a relic, a television backdrop, not a functional marketplace. Thousands of careers ended. Families that had sent fathers and sons to the floor for generations watched the tradition evaporate. They were not wrong to be afraid. They were only wrong to think they could stop it. In 1982, Peterffy had founded Timber Hill Inc. as his trading entity. Through the 1980s, Timber Hill became one of the first firms, and by many accounts the first, to use fully automated algorithmic trading for options market making. By the late 1980s, his systems were connected directly to multiple exchanges. When electronic trading infrastructure began to emerge in the 1990s, the Nasdaq's electronic systems, the new electronic communication networks, Peterffy was not adapting to the future. He had been living in it for a decade. If you have ever bought a stock online, if you have ever placed a trade on your phone, if you have ever looked at a brokerage screen and seen a bid-ask spread so tight you barely notice the cost, you are living in the house this man built, not alone. The transformation of global markets from floor-based to electronic was driven by many forces and many people. Josh Levine built the Island ECN. Blair Hull built Hull Trading. Instinet had been operating an electronic network since 1969. The Nasdaq itself launched as an electronic quotation system in 1971. Peterffy did not invent electronic trading, but he was arguably the earliest and most persistent individual force pushing automated computation onto physical trading floors that wanted nothing to do with it. He did not wait for the infrastructure, he brought his own. In 1993, Peterffy founded what would become Interactive Brokers Group, integrating his trading operations with a brokerage that offered electronic access to markets worldwide. The company reflected its founders' engineering mentality, extremely low commissions, direct market access, a technology-first architecture that prioritized function over aesthetics. The trader workstation interface is famously dense, packed with data, designed by engineers for engineers. It is not beautiful. It works. The company went public in May 2007 with an IPO on the NASDAQ. At the time of the offering, Peterffy retained approximately 84% ownership. That number matters more than almost any other in this story. Most founders dilute their stakes through round after round of venture funding, giving away pieces of their company to get it off the ground. Peterffy never needed to. His trading operations were profitable from the start. The edge funded the growth. The growth funded the expansion. He never sold because he never had to sell. When the IPO arrived, it was not a funding event. It was a liquidity event for a man who already owned nearly everything. That is how you go from a rented computer terminal to a net worth that Forbes has estimated in the range of $25 to $30 billion and higher, depending on the day's closing price. Not by raising capital and burning through it in pursuit of future revenue. By being right about a mathematical certainty every day for 40 years and never giving away the company that proved it. There is a dimension to this story that would be dishonest to leave out. In 2012, Peterffy spent millions of his own money on television advertisements warning against socialism. He drew explicitly on his Hungarian childhood, his experience under communism, his conviction that centralized economic control destroys individual ambition. The ads were polarizing. Some viewers saw a principled statement from a man who had lived under the system he was warning against. Others saw a billionaire deploying personal narrative to advocate for policies that protected concentrated wealth. Both readings contain truth. The contradiction is part of the man, and there is another contradiction, quieter and more profound. The man who automated Wall Street has expressed concern about what Wall Street's automation has become. In interviews over the past decade, Peterffy has spoken about high-frequency trading strategies that exploit speed advantages measured in microseconds, strategies that are the direct descendants of his own innovations, and has characterized some of them as potentially harmful to market fairness. The flash crash of May 6, 2010, when automated systems drove the Dow down nearly 1,000 points in minutes before recovering, was a warning shot from the world Peterffy helped create. The creator looking at the creation, wondering whether it went too far. If you have read one of Peterffy's books, if you have used interactive brokers, if you have watched a market move in real time on a screen and understood that the price you saw was the product of algorithms competing in microseconds, tell us what that encounter meant to you. Tell us in the comments. Think about what a modern trading data center looks like. You have seen photographs, maybe server racks in cold aisles, blue LED lighting reflecting off polished floors, cable management as precise as surgery. The defining feature is silence. No voices, no hand signals, no paper tickets drifting to the floor. Machines trading with machines at speeds no human eye can track, in volumes no human mind can hold, across every market on the planet, all day and all night. Where 1,000 people once stood shouting and waving their arms, there is now only the hum of cooling fans. One man started that. He started it with a servo motor and a mechanical finger on a trading floor that did not know what was coming, in a country he had entered 20 years earlier without a single word of its language. Thomas Peterffy is still alive. He is 81 years old. He still holds a controlling stake in Interactive Brokers. He still, by the accounts of people who work with him, thinks like an engineer, which means he thinks about whether the system is working correctly, not about whether the system is working in his favor. These are not always the same question, and the distance between them may be the most important thing about him. He fled a country that told him what he was allowed to be. He arrived in a country that did not tell him anything because no one could understand him. He taught himself a language, then taught himself to program in that language, then built machines that could do what the smartest traders in the world were doing by hand, only faster and without error and without stopping. The exchanges tried to stop him. They failed. The floor traders tried to stop him. They were right to try, and they failed. The rules tried to stop him. He read the rules more carefully than the people who wrote them. He did not invent the future of trading, but he forced it into the present, physically, mechanically, one bolted-on device at a time, until the present had no choice but to become the future. The trading floor is quiet now. He made it that way. If this story changed how you think about where your stock trades actually go when you press the button subscribe. We tell stories about the specific human beings who built the systems you live inside, whether you knew they were there or not.